Hall of Famer here, Kelly Pavlik, man. We were literally just talking about you. It's funny, our co-producer schedule. We were just talking about whether or not Jermaine Teller, I don't know, it was something about Jermaine Teller and your two fights got brought up, and obviously the fights with Hopkins and stuff like that. But I know you're doing your own podcast now, man, so please take this opportunity to let everybody know first and foremost where they could catch you on your own podcast, and how often do you do it?
Well, yeah, I took a little break from the podcast. I'm all over, man. I'm in and out of town. I'm actually getting ready. I got to head to Vegas for 3 weeks on a couple other things that I got going on. But the podcast, when we do it, we do it usually Sundays, non-football season. We do Sundays at 7 o'clock. When football starts back up again, we move it to Tuesdays at 7 o'clock. And it's called The Punchline with Kelly Pavlik and James Dominguez. And you can find us on Facebook Live, YouTube, and then we also have our fight page, so on Facebook.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I'll start it right off. We got a couple of questions from the people. We put out a post letting them know you'll be on. We got David Maldonado in New York City that says, "What's up, champ? How would a pretty boy Floyd versus Sweet Pea Whitaker fight play out at 135?
Wow. Well, Floyd at 135 was a banger too, though. I mean, well, you could bang. I don't know. It's hard to see Floyd losing. I can say a couple things on it. You know, my take on it. First of all, a lot of people would think it would be a boring fight because of the tactical skills of each fighter. I think it would be a dream come true to watch a fight like that. But I have to go with Floyd in that fight, and here's the reason why. Sweet Pea, was he one of the best defensive fighters of all time? Yeah, obviously. The only problem with Sweet Pea, though, he could have made fights a lot easier. Usually when Sweet Pea made you miss, he was so far out of range that he couldn't counter. And the name of the game is making you miss and making you pay. I think with that being said, I think Floyd was slick and fast. And I think Floyd, and throughout the long run of the fight, I think Floyd would win it. I think Floyd would pick it up towards the middle rounds and the end of the fight, and I think he was still in the rounds.
All right. I'm going to keep shooting these off unless you guys got something to jump in. We got James Valdez in San Antonio, Texas. It says, what was your toughest fight?
Oh, shit,
Good
man.
question.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, you have Miranda, you got Taylors, you got Hopkins, you got Martinez. I would have to probably say, you know, obviously the Hopkins fight. That was one where, you know, it wasn't my night, and they had to dig deep just to finish the fight. Didn't want to get dropped or stopped in that fight. So I'd have to say that, you know, Bernard is a legend. Sergio Martinez was a hell of a fighter too, you know, and that was a frustrating fight, you know, because I was up, you know, and they had me up after 9 rounds, but Sergio picked it up in those last couple rounds, and there was nothing I could do. I couldn't pull the trigger, and that made it tough. And the first couple rounds, Sergio was tough to figure out as well. I mean, he moved and he worked off the stick, and he popped at different angles. So those were pretty tough. Then when you get down to just the overall crudiness of a fight, you know, I have to say Miranda because of how hard he hit. You know, Miranda hit so damn hard. Everything he hit you would hurt.
Damn. Austin in Tech. Was somebody gonna jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Looking at you know, from generations, eras, and things of that nature. Do you think that boxing have plateaued in terms of skills?
Not at all. It's actually scientifically impossible. These athletes are evolving. You know, in every sport you see it.
Kelly, I hate to interrupt, but can you just focus a little, because you're not in the center and it's cutting your whole face and head off for the audience.
How about here?
You want to go to the right or your left? Other way. That way. There you go. You're in the center now.
Okay. Shit, these dogs. Hold on. Major. No, so, you know, the sports are evolving. The athletes, and they're faster. They're stronger. They're getting bigger, and the same with boxing. I mean, they can't get bigger in boxing because you got weight classes, but these guys, I mean, they close the gap so fast, and a lot of people take that away. You know, like the biggest thing I always get in arguments with is everybody's always like, oh, well, the guys of old school or the guys of yesteryear were better. And that's because of history. And that's because of guys growing up and listening to their father and their grandfather talk about how good fighters are. I'm not knocking them. They're all these guys from the past are legends. But if you're going to go back and watch Harry Greb fight and watch him train, the guy fought like the mascot for Notre Dame. You're going to tell me he had better technical skills?
Word.
So it's it's irritating. It's it's just like I said, it's science, man. These guys, these athletes have evolved. These guys today, it don't look like it because they're in against other top guys, but their fast twitch muscles are just so fast. I mean, watch how fast a guy like Crawford and Teofimo and Lomachenko, how fast they close the gaps on these punches and how explosive their punches are. And it's a totally different ball game, and it's not taking anything away from the old school. It's just it's facts. I mean, these guys can fight and they can hit and they could and their technical skills. I mean, watch the half steps, watch how they catch punches and fire off. I had a funny one. Somebody told me on there during the argument. They were like, "Well, Jake LaMotta, they don't teach the double shuffle no more." And I said, because they can't today. Guys are too fast. You tried pulling a double shuffle jab on somebody today or a right hand, they're going to get their neck broken. It's just a different ball game, and speed is the game. So it's just for me when I hear that, then when you stump them on it, when you stump some of these guys on the records and the records of the opponents, the first thing that comes out is when they don't have anything else to say is, well, they had more heart. And that's not true either. And I'm not saying that this is not being biased. I mean, I've been retired a decade. So believe me, this ain't nothing coming biased for me. I'm just saying how it is. I mean, there's nothing more than 30 years from now, me wanting to sit on the couch with my grandkid telling him, yeah, I would whoop these guys' ass, right? Middleweight title fight. But the reality is 30 years from now, these guys are going to be that much farther ahead than they are now.
Kelly, speaking of the past generation and fighting now, what do you make of the sudden resurgence of certain fighters and exhibitions? De La Hoya's talking about it. Ricky Hatton threw his name out there this week or last week, I think. Miguel Cotto, Marquez. I mean, the lists keep going on and on. What do you make of it, and what is your opinion on it?
I'm up in the air on it. I mean, a part of me saying as long as they're coming back fighting each other, they're older and they're going against each other. I got it's not that bad. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, you guys are old, man. And it's just time to hang it up. I mean, legacy. I could tell you this as being 39 years old, almost 40. But it being around that age where, like, I caught the tail end of Sugar Ray Leonard's career, I could see where a lot of people where his legacy could diminish a little bit. To me personally, hell no, it don't, because I understand the fact that he was older and he was fighting way past his prime. But sometimes you just got to know to let it go. Personally, to me, my mental health, my health in general, my life is more important than going back out there for that last hurrah. Some of these guys, it may not be for money. I don't think De La Hoya needs the money. And some of these guys, it may be for money. I'm not sure, but I mean, I'm not totally against it, but I'm not for it. It is what it is. And if they want to do it, I think the Roy Jones Tyson went a lot better than expected. I was really expecting to see two geriatrics in there, stinking it up. But they actually, I can't say anything. I mean, they went in there, they looked good, and they would have whooped my ass. I'll tell you that. So I can't say anything on that.
Can you give us a couple fighters or one fighter that you feel like is the evolution? Like when we look at the NBA, we see the skills and athleticism of Russell Westbrook. He's not your normal point guard. Or you saw the athleticism of LeBron James and his longevity. Do you who in boxing today you could look at and be like, seeing the naked eye, oh, he's the evolution, that speed and power we haven't seen before? Good question.
Very good question. And there's a handful of them. That's the scary part. It don't seem like it. It don't seem like it because there are so many of them. But let's just go Shakur Stevenson. Oh, okay, how about Boots Enos? I mean, look at him. That dude. Hell, I was at first. Everybody was talking. I'm going, who did he fight? Then I watched him fight, and I didn't have to see him fight any world championship level guy.
Yeah,
I watched how big he is for 147, how he can box, and how he can bang if he wants to, and you can hit him. You can hit him with a 40-pound cement slab, and he ain't going nowhere. So what do you do against a guy like that this day and age? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not done. You know, people talk shit about Lomachenko. Look what Lomachenko did. Hey, listen, for 1 second, if somebody comes in and tells me, oh, yeah, well, you know, you had this many amateur fights and this and that. The guy fought 12 rounds in his second pro fight. No matter if you like him, hate him, or not, against a former world champion. I climbed the ranks, and so did many of the other legends in boxing. Sugar Ray Leonard had 20-some fights. He climbs 4, 6, 8, 10-rounders, right? A lot of champions did. But Lomachenko was able to do with his agility and his technical skills and his God-given ability. Like I said, Crawford. Then you got guys like Spence, who reminds me of a Ennis, who is big, fast, strong. So you got a lot of these guys right now coming up in boxing that are just they're freaks of nature. It don't seem like it because all these guys are competitive though with each other. So I mean, think about this too. Not too long ago, back in the day, you used to watch fights, and sometimes you would see, and I hate putting grades on fighters, but that's the only way I could do it. You used to have B-level fights, and sometimes a decent amount of times you see a B-level guy going and upset a A-level guy, right? You don't see that much this day, you know, because the game has changed that much. You know, these A-level fighters, these elite guys are elite fighters, so...
Okay, all right. That's fair.
Hey,
That's
Kelly.
fair.
How you doing, Kelly? It's King. I mean, Investix. I got a quick question for you because you mentioned Ray Leonard twice, and who'd you come up watching? You said you caught the tail end of Ray Leonard's career. Who'd you grow up watching that got you into it to the point where you first walked into a gym?
Well, I did watch Leonard a handful of his fights early on, but from the age that I was at, you just kind of like at 13, 14 years old, I think that's when he fought Camacho. Maybe I might have been a little bit older than that. But those are the fights that could play in your head too, though, because a lot of times, as soon as I think of Leonard, I think of watching him fall around the ring against Camacho. But I watched Leonard because Leonard still to this day, and I know this is going to kind of be like I'm being a hypocrite here, but I still, with very few with older fighters, I could put Sugar Ray Leonard up there on my all-time list. But I was never I never really followed any fighter. I wasn't a guy, you know, remember back in the day you had the KO Digest boxing magazine, and a lot of fighters would take like the posters in the middle of their favorite fighter and put it up on the wall. Yes. I never did that. I never really had anybody. I observed a lot, and I just like watching boxing in general. De La Hoya was huge. Pernell Whitaker was a big one. Obviously Gotti, because he was just an exciting fighter. So I always kind of, you know, went that way watching him fight. And it was just fun. You know, it was just fun watching boxing in general. I never really had, like, if you would ask me at that time, who was your favorite fighter? I really didn't have anybody that I could have pointed out. You know, I would have just rattled off a bunch of names like I am now.
We got King Born in actually Austin in Texas says, when you were fighting in the middleweight division, what weight did you walk around at and what foods would you eat during the week of the fight? Again, thank you for coming on the show. I've been a fan of yours since I was a kid.
So that the weight changed a little bit throughout my career. When I was younger, obviously I walked around maybe 173. Then as you start getting older, you know, I stayed at middleweight for a decade, and that's pretty hard. From the age of 18 to 29, you know, that was it was tough to do. But as I started getting older, you know, I started getting up right around 178. I would say 179, and then obviously the hardest and the worst one was the Martinez fight. Going into camp, I was 188, so I was 28 pounds over my, you know, over the weight, but it was just getting hard at that point. So, you know, when I ate, it was a difference. You know, making weight is more of a science. So you start off the first month of camp, I did a little bit of calorie restriction, but it wasn't like strict because at that point you're really doing a lot of miles, running miles, you're training a lot. You're really in the heat of your training, and so you need to fuel up. You have to eat the foods and get the calories, and then after that you finally start taming down the calories a little bit, probably about a month out from the fight. And then usually the last 2 weeks is kind of you're down to minimal food, and you're just kind of hoping that your opponent's going through the same as you are. But the foods would consist of, when I was right there when I started really cutting, we ate fish, a lot of chicken, a lot of vegetables. Nighttime, if I got hungry, I would make cabbage soup, or my dad would make cabbage soup, and I would eat that so I could go to bed, on not an empty stomach, so I could get a good night's sleep. So really had to break it down. I mean, when they say like you got 2 fights, you got to skill and then you got to fight, it is very true.
King Born in Brooklyn says, King Born here, peace, Mr. Pavlik. Loved you when you fought, in your opinion. Excuse me, I guess he meant a period there. So loved you when you fought. In your opinion, in your weight class, when you fought, who was the best offense and defensive fighters? I'm glad you're doing great. Peace.
So first of all, thank you. At that time, I mean, you have to go with Taylor. I know a lot of people were putting Taylor down at that time. He was coming off the fights that he had, and I'm not just saying this, but Taylor was a bad dude, and people forget that. He looked bad against Wiki Wright, but I think Wiki Wright right now could come back and make everybody look bad still. Mm-hmm. He may not win, but it'll make people look bad. He fought Kasim Uma right before me. Kasim Uma throws 115 punches around, and he was awkward. So with that being said, Jermaine, he was where he was at for a reason. Jermaine had quick hands. Jermaine could fight. Just look what he was doing with Carl Froch. Carl Froch, in a lot of people's opinion, is a great fighter, and Jermaine Taylor was beating the crap out of Carl for 12 rounds until he got knocked out. So Taylor at the time, I would say, was probably one of the more skilled guys at middleweight. And then, a little bit towards the end of my reign, you had somebody like Sergio Martinez coming up who both had the offense and the defense.
We got Coach Myers in Connecticut who says, looking back on your career, what fight you wanted the most but never got the opportunity to fight that fighter? And who is the most talented fighter you've been in the ring with, amateur or pro?
Okay. So I wanted a lot of fights. So that was, I wanted to fight Abraham because I wanted, the straps. I wanted to unify the middleweight division. I probably would have got rid of those belts so that way I didn't have to pay all them damn sanctioning fees. But
man, we wish in the middleweight division they could have some unification bouts,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing, I wanted those fights, but those were unrealistic between promoters. They wanted me to go over to Germany to fight Arthur Abraham, which was ridiculous. I was the lineal champion, and I beat the guy who had the belts. So I did want that. The Paul Williams fight, I wanted that fight. Again, that was another one where through promoters, Ludabella, Top Rank, it just wasn't negotiated, and it kept falling through. And the thing that I always do, because I defend fighters, and I feel like, they need it. Anytime you see a fight that don't happen or something goes wrong with a fight, usually the fighter is the one that gets to blame, and it's always the fighter that's ducking.
You're right.
And I can tell you guys this, unless the game has changed that much since I've been out, it's really not the fighter. It's not. It comes down to managers, promoters, and a fighter goes in there. They train their ass off. They're concentrating on the fight. They got film breakdown, the gym, everything else. They're trying to make weight. The last thing they're doing is worrying about how much is going on with a fight. So a lot of the times, it does come down to the promoters. Don't get me wrong. If a fighter feels that he's not getting his fair share of a purse, yeah, he'll probably bitch or put up a bitch, but usually it's negotiated out and it comes to being worked out. But for the most part, man, it's promoters when the fights don't happen.
We got 40 Thief says, Canelo versus Ward, present time on ESPN. Who wins and how? Wishing much success.
All right, that's a good one. Listen, Canelo is a bad dude. People don't give him the credit for it. he don't get the credit. Canelo could fight. He is that good. But with that being said, Canelo from junior middleweight, and most of the guys at super middleweight, I think that he could go unbeaten. But when you start getting into guys like Andre Ward, who was a big natural super middleweight, who could box the way he did, and frustrate you, I have to lean towards Andre Ward in that fight. I think it would be an ugly fight. Andre Ward kind of reminds me of Bernard Hopkins, the way he fights. He gets in there, he offsets your momentum. He frustrates you with the grabbing and his footwork. But I think Andre Ward would get in and kind of rough up Canelo a little bit. He would offset Canelo's punches, and then I think he would start getting off on his punches and everything and start wearing down Canelo. So I would have to lean towards Andre Ward in that fight.
We got Young Tigre in Canelo. I guess he meant to say, is Canelo number one pound for pound in the sport right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible not to put him. So I break my now, pound for pound's opinionated as hell, and everybody has their own opinion. So, but I break mine down by the talent of a fighter, the natural ability, and then I also put in the resume. And right now, if you're going by resume and talent, by how they're performing in the ring, I got to go with Canelo right now, number one. I got Crawford and Spence. That's a toss-up between them guys right behind him. I've seen some people's, including I think it was ESPN's, where they don't even have Spence in the top 10, and I couldn't believe that because right now Spence probably got the top 3 resumes in boxing, if you break it down. And his skills and size and everything else is just unbelievable. So I got them in the top 5. But, yeah, I look at it as Canelo. I mean, what he's doing right now is kind of hard not to put him number one. And if you don't got him in the top 5, then it's pure bias. So,
we have Adrian Rowan in Wisconsin. He says, just giving a shout out, champ. You're one of my favorite fighters. Love the blue collar style and the way you dismantled Edison Miranda to elevate yourself to take the title. So no question, just love.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
We got What Rep It. This says, when you were active and joined Robert Garcia, what was the main thing he worked on as a coach?
Well, I'll tell you what, man, it was pretty sweet going with Robert Garcia. And I tell you one thing that I liked about Robert Garcia was when I got there, he didn't want to change my style. And it's what I always say too. He goes, listen, you've been fighting this way for so long now. He goes, my only job is to sharpen with what you have. And it's true. You can't take somebody that's been fighting that long and change their style in 2 or 3 or 4 months. I mean, you can't even do it in a year, to be honest with you. So, but when I got with Robert, it was neat because he showed me all these different little tricks. After you're pro so long, like just in my situation, I was already pro at that time. I went there 11 years. And I had 3 world title belts in my trophy case, and I made the money. So at that point, I really didn't want to leave home, and I was kind of pissed. I'm like, what the hell is he going to show me that I don't already know? And you'll be surprised, if you're not hard-headed and you open up your brain and you're willing to learn, there's a lot of shit out there to learn. And just small things that Robert did. And he was very repetitious with the work that he did. And, the angles, the movements, the certain combos, placing combos, all that different stuff. And it was pretty neat. So it was definitely a learning experience.
So let me jump in here right quick. Kelly, if say somebody hit you up and they say, yo, we want to give you, a nice, nice platform, nice charity fight, opponent of your choice. You don't have to pick the opponent, but which modern day current trainer would you pick to train you for that fight? Who do you like out there?
Well, I'm going to go, I would probably go with, how I got to where I got just because of the training that I did and everything else. Jack would be one of the front runners, but let's put Jack to the side because we already know he was my trainer. So you got a lot of guys out there. Listen, Buddy McGirt does a great job. Buddy McGirt, even back in the day when he was training Gotti, but again, that's where I'm going off what Robert said. You seen when Buddy was training Gotti, you had him moving and everything else, and Gotti started off the fight moving around. But as soon as Gotti got hit with a good shot, all that shit went out the window. You know what I mean? So it's just that's over, muscle memory and everything that Gotti had. But there's a lot of trainers out there. I mean, Garcia is great. Buddy McGirt does a fantastic job. Juan Diaz, I think it's Antonio Diaz. He does a good job, but I think Antonio is more of an offensive trainer. So I was already an offensive fighter, so I would want somebody pretty much to get me back to like my early days and my amateur days, to back to the head movement and shit like that. So find one of them guys out there, maybe Cunningham, somebody that was going to work on finesse.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. We got Brandon Lenz, who says, you once had a fight postponed due to an infect. I remember that. You had something like staph. What was it called?
Yeah, staph. It was,
staph infection.
Yeah, MRSA.
So you once had a fight postponed due to an infected knuckle. How did the injury happen, and did you ever fully recover from it?
Yeah, that was, and again, there's always shit with stuff, but that was it was simple, but it was dangerous. So I got that from training camp, and I can't remember, it all runs together if it was Miguel Espino or Rubio fight. But anyways, staph infections come from, especially in gyms, those are like number one places to get it. But from when you have dirty shit touching something, especially if you got an open wound or anything like that. Well, I ended up having a little cut on my knuckle, and throughout the entire training camp, it was small, so it was nothing that ever was bothering me, but I kept putting the same hand wraps on. And I think every fighter knows, I mean, if you go into any gym, 9 out of 10 fighters are going to have some old stank ass hand wraps that they're putting on. So I kept putting those on. Then I had the same sparring gloves. So you take 2 months of training camp with that finger, that knuckle being in the sweat and everything. So I remember after the fight, it was probably about 2 weeks after the fight, and I was playing basketball on my court, and I felt a little pinch on my knuckle, so I wiped it on my trunks, and probably a couple seconds later, I felt it again. I looked down at my knuckle, and there was just like a hole. There was a hole on the top of my knuckle, small, but it was no blood or nothing coming out of it. It was just pus, and I go, that's not right. So I ended up going into the doctor, and they did the culture on it, and everything came back as staph infection, but I got real sick from the reaction to the medication, the vancomycin.
Sorry about that. Getting some water. And it looks like the next one is from Big Casual, who says, what's up, champ? Do you think... No. Who do you think would win a prime Riddick Bowe versus prime Mike Tyson, and why? In my personal opinion, I think Bowe stops a prime Tyson worse than Buster Douglas did.
Who? I don't know, man. Mike was a beast. Riddick Bowe could fight. So if you're going in a prime, I would have to go out on a limb to say this, and I know I'm going to get a lot of people saying I'm crazy. I'm going to have to go with Riddick Bowe on that one, because the reason being was when Tyson fought guys like Bowe that were that size and stood their ground and fought and punched back, he didn't have success. And I granted that most of the guys that Tyson lost to was afterwards, towards the end of his career, but Riddick Bowe was a big guy. He was 6'4", 6'5", and Riddick Bowe stood his ground and winged him punches. So I'd have to go with Riddick Bowe on that one.
All right. We got Brandon Lenz, who says, do you, Kelly Pavlik, a Hall of Famer, consider Gervonta Tank Davis a star?
Consider him what now? What was
that? A star.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. I don't think right now that he's by far the top. I shouldn't say that. I mean, he's obviously a top guy. I gotta watch how I say it because I get shit for everything. But I think Gervonta's beatable. I think he's beatable, and I'll tell you why. We just seen it. We seen it with Santa Cruz. I had him down going in that fight against Santa Cruz, and until then he had the knockout. I had him behind in this fight. until the knockout. And these are guys that are not as fast as Teofimo or Lomachenko or Haney and the other guys. So if they're up in the head in these fights, I think that you're going to see guys like Haney and Lopez and these guys, definitely ahead on the scorecards. And if he's getting touched by guys like Santa Cruz and Barrios, I think you're definitely going to see him get touched by I'm sorry, this dog. Hey, Kel, come get this dog. I'm sorry, I got 3 dogs in this house, guys, man. They go crazy all the time. But with that being said, why I think Tank could be a star is because he has that devastating power. He has that punch that could change a fight in a blink of an eye. And yes, he's fast enough. He's got good boxing skills. That's why as now sitting back and observing boxing and training some fighters and eventually going to open my own gym and everything else, I become like a student of the game again, and I break it down. So a lot of this shit really got me puzzled. I'm going, how does a guy like Tank have so much skill, but yet he allows himself to give up that many rounds in a fight, and he relies too much on his power punches and throwing power shots, and the knockout. And one day, them knockouts are not going to come. One day, a guy like Teofimo Lopez or a guy like Haney's not going to be there. They're not going to lean in to be hit by those shots, and he's going to be too far behind. But with that being said, do I think he could be that he has star power? Absolutely. Anytime that you could crack like Tank Davis, you're gonna put asses in the seats.
All right. Well, Kelly, man, those are all our questions. I want to thank you, obviously, for coming on. Please give out your social media where anybody can find you. And, yeah, man, thank you for the time. We'd love to get you back on soon.
Oh, no problem, man. Kelly Pavlik on Facebook, and then Pavlik.Kelly on Instagram.
Before you go, obviously the hot button topic today is the Wilder Fury 3, the postponement, COVID, Fury being positive now for COVID and the fight being allegedly postponed. Who were you picking in this fight, and what do you think this, I don't know, spontaneous COVID test really means? Do you buy it?
You'll never know. If it's documented, then if you went to the doctor and the doctors come out and say that he has it, then you can't. It is what it is. He has it. I mean, it's not out of question for him to have it. I mean, them camps, everything's open back up. But I don't know. And, maybe he might be buying time. I'm not sure on that. As far as the fight, I wasn't a big fan of the third one. And, I want to kind of see it move on. I think the heavyweight division is on that verge of coming back because of guys like Joshua, Wilder, Fury. But then when you have a third fight, I think a lot of fans wanted to see Fury, Joshua now. And I hate picking heavyweight fights because anything can happen at any given moment. Just like with the Tyson Riddick Bowe fight, that's a fight where anything can happen. And Wilder hits hard enough. It's crazy. And I tell people that too. Wilder, you could put him up there as one of the hardest punchers in the heavyweight division and probably in the heavyweight eras. Wilder can crack. He's 6'7". He's got that long range. I don't know how he generates the power. He would not be a person I would show my young fighter, teach my young fighter to punch but he hits that hard. So it's hard in a fight like that. If he comes out and he's pissed off and he wants to knock Fury out, Wilder stands a great chance of winning.
Well, Kelly, man, thank you once again for your time, man. It was great talking boxing with someone as experienced and knowledgeable as yourself. We look forward to getting you back on soon, champ.
For sure, man. Let me know. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Thank you. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hall of Famer, Kelly Pavlik.
Yo, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like, subscribe, and share. As always, if you want to support us to the next level, head over to the patreon.com/ThaBoxingVoice. We have tons of exclusive from Border Wars, Entitled, betting shows, the list goes on and on and on. But in addition to that, if you guys have questions for fighters, trainers, and promoters, this is where you can submit them. We will run out, get these questions answered, and put it back on the show just for you guys. Appreciate it. Peace.